I want to thank the Duport Tile House for having us here today. We have some board members here tonight. This is where we have these lectures, and it's just a wonderful place. And when we're up and running over there, this is going to be an even a better place for you to come and learn about history in Tredyffrin Township. Our speaker tonight is Sean Moore. I guess people know about him because there's a lot of people here. Usually we don't quite have this many people here. But Sean Moore is a geographer. Is that fair?
I guess you call it GIS analyst. They would say today, but it's, you know, cartography.
Cartography. He could probably do a lot better in terms of introduction. But so I'll make it short. I think I'll let you do that. But he's going to talk about mapping, as you know, mapping the Revolutionary War. And as a preservation planner who worked at the Brandywine Conservancy, was very much involved in preserving the Battle of Brandywine, which we've been successful in preserving the historic core of that battlefield, about 500 or 600 acres over the past 15 years. I got very much involved in looking at the old troop movements and the old roads and the old maps. I was trying to find a map that's somewhere in a military history museum in Portugal, of all places, and it's still there. I don't know if you know about that, but unfortunately they changed the military attaches, and I couldn't pronounce his name. We never got the map. But Sean is going to talk to us about looking at that geography and ascertaining where these troop movements occurred, and then putting it on the map. So much happened, as you probably know, in Tredyffrin Township in Chester County in 1777. And so he will talk about that. Is there anything I missed that you wanted to?
That's good. I'll cover the rest.
Thank you very much. Thanks again.
Thanks, Bob, and thank you, everybody. Why did the British want to invade Pennsylvania in the first place? I mean, I guess, you know, a lot of you probably know that I mean, Philadelphia was the capital, so we needed to get that, but that's, you know, that needs to be made clear. And a lot of people know, I mean, it's all kind of bits and pieces, right? Everyone's heard of the Battle of Brandywine, and the Paoli, people around here have heard of the Paoli Massacre, and we all, you know where Valley Forge is, and the Liberty Bell, and some of you might even heard of the Battle of Cooch's Bridge. But the question is, you know, how do they all fit together? And that's kind of what I'm trying to help with here. Because if you take the example of Boston, right? You know, you've all been to Boston, and you know when you go up there, they talk about the Boston Tea Party and Paul Revere and Lexington and Concord and Bunker Hill, and they tie them all together. I mean, you go downtown in Boston, there's a visitor center. You get the map, and it shows you all these places, how they all fit together, the timeline, and you kind of know where you stand in Boston when it comes to the Revolution. But it's different around here, and that's one of the things I'm trying to remedy, to tie all these things together. So you know, so one of my hopes is that you know, with this we'll be able to tell a better story about how Pennsylvania fit into the Revolutionary War and the founding of the nation, and how the Philadelphia campaign. I mean, think about this. You know, we talk about how Valley Forge, you know, transformed the army into a cohesive fighting force, and that's true. But what I'm thinking is Valley Forge, you know, gave them discipline, right? They learned how to march and how to stick together. But what I'm thinking, just the work I've done here, is it was really the Philadelphia campaign that gave them the courage, the confidence, and the unity to make it work. I mean, you know, not to diminish the value of discipline, but you know, you got to fight really to get the courage. That's what I'm thinking. That's kind of my personal theory. So that's. So anyway, so I'm going to get started and show you the animated map, and as I go through this, I'm going to point out some pivotal moments in the battle and in the Paoli Massacre too, that helped determine history. You know, pivotal moments where it could have gone one way, but it went this way, and you know, things could have been different. So, I'm going to have to sit down to do this because I got a lot of stuff to work here. I'm kind of like, you know, Captain Kirk at the command center here. So, if you don't mind.
Do the green boxes need?
Okay, right. Right, so yeah, that's a good question. So the blue boxes are the Continentals, the red are the British, the green are the Hessians, and I'm going to talk about them in a second. The Hessians were the Germans that were helping them out. And I guess it's also important to mention here that each one of these boxes represents approximately a brigade, which is about 1,000 troops. So we got about 15,000 British, about 15,000 Continental troops, you know, right down the street down by Chad's Ford. So we're talking here about the Philadelphia campaign. And the Philadelphia campaign took place in the fall of 1777, and the Battle of Brandywine was fought on September 11th. And the Brandywine was the largest single-day battle of the American Revolution. And a week after Brandywine, the armies, the week after Brandywine, they faced each other again at Paoli, and a week before they were down in Delaware. So the story, you know, across the Pennsylvania countryside, we had General George Washington and his Continental Army attempting to stop the British invasion under General William Howe. Okay, so we're getting the basics here. As Howe marched his army from Maryland towards the colonial capital of Philadelphia, and they battled, like I mentioned, at Couch's Bridge down there, Brandywine, and at Goshen, which is the Battle of the Clouds, and Paoli. And the thing is, all these battles ended with the British occupying the field. Okay, but Washington's army remained intact, and that's important because that means they lived to fight another day and you know, eventually go on. And although Howe during the campaign managed to capture Philadelphia, Washington continued to fight on to eventual victory 4 years later at Yorktown. So now we're going to use the maps to kind of understand the strategy here. So in order to understand the British war strategy in 1777, we need to go back to the beginning of the war, and we'll talking about the Battle of Lexington and Concord. So after the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the British they occupied Boston, and while the British were occupying Boston, the Continental Army launched its first major military campaign, and that campaign was against, who knows? It was against Quebec.
Right.
Okay, so we're up in Quebec, and unfortunately, that invasion failed, and the Continental Army was driven back in a blinding snowstorm by the Canadian militia, and that dashed any hopes of Quebec becoming the 14th colony. So in 1776, now this is the year before the Battle of Brandywine, after almost a year-long siege, Washington and the Continental Army were sieging Boston for almost a year. After a year, General Washington and his army managed to drive out the British, who were now under General Howe in Boston, and they kicked them out. Okay, but before long, the British army moved down south to Long Island. Okay, and after the Battle of Brooklyn, Howe carried out, or during the Battle of Brooklyn, Howe carried out a surprise flanking maneuver. And this is one of the things we're going to see. We're going to see these flanking maneuvers a couple more times tonight. But Howe ended up taking New York City pretty easily, and occupied the city, while you see the Continental Army is heading south into New Jersey and towards Pennsylvania. Okay, so the reason why I'm telling you all this about Quebec and New York is so that we can look at this map again and we can see the situation in 1777. Okay, the British, they control Quebec, so that's why Quebec has a red star, and they also control New York City, while Boston and Philadelphia remain in colonial hands, so they got the blue stars here. So at this point, Boston and Philadelphia really are, we have something to be proud of in the city we live in. I mean, Boston and Philadelphia were the two primary seats of liberty, okay? But the British recognize that. So in order to capitalize on their victories, their two previous victories in Quebec and New York City, they had a plan in the spring of '77 to send a force under General John Burgoyne, and he was going to go south from Canada and to Albany, New York, while General Howe, who's in New York City, was expected to march north to rendezvous with Burgoyne. So you can kind of see how that would work right there. The hope was that it would put Britain in control of the Hudson River Valley and cut New England off from the rest of the colonies. And here we're driving a physical wedge in between Boston and Philadelphia. And so it's a good plan. General Howe's cooperation was vital to the success of this plan. But the problem was that the British officials in London failed to provide direct orders to Howe. Okay, so he didn't get direct orders, so he was allowed to pursue his own agenda. And he wasn't really interested in sharing the glory with Burgoyne. What Howe really wanted to do, he really wanted to go to Philadelphia. So he wanted to take the capital of Philadelphia. But the problem was that the land route to Philadelphia was blocked by Washington and his army, so that wouldn't have been an easy way to go. So you think about, well, maybe just take the direct river route up the Delaware Bay and the Delaware River. But the problem there was that they had these underwater iron-tipped logs, okay, that were intended to pierce the hulls of any approaching ships. And I forget what these are called. It's some French word. Somebody probably knows, right? Anyway, this
Javelin.
yes. I got to write that down next time. But yeah, but these things would be rough if you're in a ship. So now that the land route's out, the Delaware Bay route's out. So there's really only one remaining way to get to Philadelphia, and that would be up the Chesapeake. Okay, so that's what the British did from New York City with a fleet of over 250 ships, and these were led by General Howe's brother, Admiral Richard Howe, and he took all those ships down there, and then they left in late July. It was about a month-long journey to get to Elkton, Maryland. So the land route from the Chesapeake to Philadelphia is going to take Howe through Maryland and Delaware and the peaceful Quaker farms of Pennsylvania's Brandywine Valley. Remember, the Quakers are pacifists, so this is like really alarming to them. So to stop this advance, General Washington, he came down from New Jersey, marched his army through Philadelphia, kind of like showed off a little bit for the Congress, and that would have been August 24th, on his way down to meet Howe and the British army that were threatening the capital. So the first conflict in this campaign occurred down there in Delaware at Couch's Bridge. And Couch's Bridge is down near Newark, Delaware, the University of Delaware, and near Christiana and the Christiana Mall. So there's just, you got to know where these things are, all right? So at this point, most of Washington's men are up by Newport, Delaware, along the Red Clay Creek. So they're and this is a good strategy, Washington's strategy. Guard the fords of the creek. Don't let them cross. So he had most of his guys up there at Red Clay Creek up at Newport, and a bunch of other ones, some more troops back in Wilmington, and that's actually where Washington's headquarters was at this point in Wilmington. So there's really only a couple of brigades down there at Couch's Bridge. It was some light infantry guys, and they were facing the entire British army, so it really wasn't much of a battle, and Howe easily got rid of those Continental brigades, and they retired back to Newport. So a couple days after that, and Howe, he kind of likes to battle and then camp out for a few days and think about what just happened. So while he was doing that, Washington met and held a council of war with some of his top generals at the Hale Burns house in Stanton, Delaware, and they need to think, oh, how are we going to defend Wilmington, because Howe's on his way. So what they decided to do is they set up some artillery along Red Clay Creek, just pointing right at Howe, and they were ready to battle. So, we know that there really wasn't a big battle down here. It ended up being at Brandywine, but Washington was prepared, and the important thing here is Washington was prepared with his full army. All his 15,000 guys. They were lined up and ready to fight, they were standing their ground down there in Delaware. But Howe, he doesn't like to take these direct assaults. So what he did is he just headed north up to Kennett Square and figures, well, I don't need Wilmington. I'm heading to Philadelphia. I'll just go around Howe, and then that kind of forced Washington out of his spot, and he had to head up to Chad's Ford. So that's what happened there. So now we've kind of set the stage for Brandywine, and what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the morning of the battle. And this picture right here, if anyone is familiar with the area, that's the Kennett Meeting House, a Quaker meeting house, and the green guys coming up the road are actually the British. You can see their British flag, and then you have some of those Continental Light Infantry taking a stand behind the rocks. And this is what I talk about with Boston versus Philadelphia. They love to talk about the Minutemen and how great they were. And we don't really talk much about it, but I mean, we had these guys down here. These guys were just as much patriots fighting on Chester County soil for our country. So this is the pre-dawn scene. Okay, so this is a map, and you can see Kennett Square down at the bottom and Westchester up at the top. This is the pre-dawn scene on September 11th. Washington's Continental Army, they're there in blue, and they're braced to defend Brandywine Creek, while Howe's army is over encamped at around modern-day Kennett Square. Now the British had marched up from Newark, Delaware, the morning before the battle, and the Continental Army had actually arrived. The Continental Army moves a lot faster. They arrived on the afternoon of the 9th from Newport. So Washington, he set up his headquarters at the Ring House, which is located in today's Brandywine Battlefield Park. Okay, and he had his artillery, which is Proctor's artillery, on the high ground overlooking Chadds Ford. So in order to slow down, they knew how it was coming, so in order to slow him down, they sent some of the light infantry positions up ahead to slow down the march. They didn't expect the light infantry to stop Howe, but they'd at least slow him down and get an idea of where he was. And so some of them are over by the Kennett Meeting House, and some others at the Anvil Tavern, which is where Longwood Gardens is today. So just imagine the Kennett Meeting House, Longwood Gardens. That's where the light infantry were. And here's strategically, here's what's going on. Washington, he's covering Chadds Ford, right? And he also deployed his men along 6 other fords. And you can see where I'm circling here. You can see you can see some of the troops set up. He set his guys up along 6 fords of the Brandywine. The problem was that General Cornwallis was aware of 2 other fords above the Continental position. It doesn't matter what the last ford you cover, someone knows the one above that one. So this was the route that Cornwallis planned to take to outflank Washington. Okay, and so at dawn, as Cornwallis was planning to do his flanking maneuver with the bulk of the army, General Knyphausen and his division was getting ready to move east. And his task, Knyphausen's task, was to divert or amuse the Continental Army while Cornwallis carried out the flanking maneuver. Okay, so in front of Knyphausen's division were the Queen's Rangers. Okay, remember I showed you that painting that had some green guys on there? Well, they're the Queen's Rangers, and these are loyalists. Okay, that means they're colonists fighting for the king. So since they're colonists, they got put up front. So that's the thanks they get. Okay, and also up front was British Major Patrick Ferguson, and Ferguson became famous for the Ferguson rifle, which is a breech-loaded rifle, which means that you can hide behind a rock and load your rifle. You didn't have to stand up and do all that stuff. And the rifle was known for its accuracy. Okay, so remember that he has a rifle known for its accuracy. Now, a significant portion of Knyphausen's division were Hessians, and Hessians were German-born soldiers hired out to the British. And in fact, almost a quarter of the British forces in the American Revolution were Hessians, including General Knyphausen himself. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and show you some of the animation for this. Okay, so this is the animated map. This is the thing that we've created down at our GIS department. And what you're going to see here is you see all the townships, and I can turn I can turn labels on and off. So there are the townships. You see there's Westchester and Kennett Square and Chadds Ford. I can turn on and off these historic structures, like over here the Daniel David House is a private residence, and down there the Birmingham Meeting House. You're familiar with that. And then we have the troop brigade. So there's that light infantry brigade. We got up here, we got some of the guys covering the fords, Hazen's Regiment, and these guys are actually Canadians. So we had Canadians helping us out there that day, and of course we have the Kennett Meeting House down here, and you can't tell the story of the Battle of Brandywine without putting the fords on. So there are the fords, and these you can see these are the fords that are covered. They're covered up to Buffington's Ford, but we don't have Trimble's Ford or Jeffrey's Ford covered.
What's a ford?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, a ford. Today we have bridges, right, to cross the creek. Back then, I mean, bridges are expensive, and they're still expensive today. So what you do is you just send people across the creek at the most shallow point. So you might get your boots wet, but you're probably not going to go waist high in it. And if you're some kind of carriage or a horse, you probably stay dry. So these are the fords. So fords. That's a great question, because fords are very important in this war because of there's so few bridges. You always cover the fords. That's the important thing. Okay, so another thing with this map, and this is something that only real hardcore history buffs care about. But look, I can show you the 1770 municipal boundaries, and if anyone knows, right in this area here is where Pocopson's supposed to be. Well, Pocopson you know, it's there today, but it wasn't there back then. Pocopson actually got carved out of all those municipalities there, and you can also see back then Birmingham was one big township, and today it's Chadds Ford. I can also bring in the aerial view if you want to kind of zoom in on some of the farmlands and see where these guys, you know, see the 1st Delaware Regiment is over here, and these guys are next to the Radley Run Country Club. So we can do that, and this is something that the planners like. The planners like the fact that we can bring it in and put these guys on top of a tax parcel, so we can say like, oh, you know, these guys were on. We can see whose property they were on, which can be dangerous. So when we release this, I've released this to a couple of people in the public, and I always take this layer off so they don't start you know, having ideas. And the other thing I can put on here is which is really important, is that the modern feature. So here we can say, oh yeah, there's this light infantry company right at Longwood Gardens. There's the Radley Run Country Club. You can see some of the preserved areas, Sandy Hollow Park's right there. You see the modern day roads, and the people down in Unionville School District are really interested, because here's their high school, their middle school, and one of their elementary schools, you know, right across the street from where, you know, the Hessian Jaegers and the British Grenadiers were camped. So the Unionville School District is saying like, wow, you know, here's a way we can actually get the kids interested in the Revolution, because it happened right outside their window. And then of course there's other Chadds Ford School District schools right, you know, right throughout this area. So anyway, the important, so that what I'm showing you at this point is kind of like the interactive portion of this. So it's interactive and it's animated. So I'm going to show you the animated part now, and we see right up front here is the Queen's Rangers that we talked about. Remember, the Loyalists and Ferguson rifles. And when I hit play right now, here's a clock. It's 5 a.m. and you're going to see a little timeline along the bottom too, and that's going to change. What you're going to see is that as they go, you're going to see these guys head towards the light infantry, who's going to try to stop them here at the Anvil Tavern. I think one of the stories is these guys are actually having a couple drinks while they're waiting. But you know, you can see by the terms of the numbers, they're not there to stop them. They're there to kind of just get a feel for where they are. So I'm gonna start up, and here they go. So here come the British, and they're coming up the road, and they're gonna clash with Maxwell's guys. And Maxwell, they kind of retreat back to the Kennett Meeting House, and the British, you know, they just keep on coming. Nothing's gonna stop them. This is Knife's House's division. And you see here now out to about 8 o'clock, and then the artillery's firing, and the British are setting up their artillery. And at this point, remember, this is the Quaker Meeting House over here, the Kennett Meeting House. There actually was a meeting going on, like right as these guys were passing by. They're in their midweek meeting, and one of the friends reported, you know, while there was much noise and confusion without, all was peaceful and quiet within. So they had a good attitude about it. And of course, as we saw right there, that the noise and confusion went right past their meeting house and set up along the Brandywine. So that's there we are at 10 o'clock. And the nice thing about this, when I was saying before how we had the map with all the lines and arrows, which can get confusing. Well, the problem with the animated map is now we're looking down here what Kneiphausen was doing, and we forgot to see what Cornwallis was doing. Right? We kind of know what he's doing. He's heading up to the ford. So while Kneiphausen's doing this, here's Cornwallis, and his goal. He's trying to get up here to Trimble's Ford, and it's one of these mornings where it's kind of a foggy morning, and everything that Cornwallis is doing at this point, he's kind of behind the hills, is totally unknown by Washington. So this is a total stealth mission here with like 9,000 troops. So it's a real, I mean, as far as you got to hand it to the British, it was a real good thing they had going there. Now, one thing you might have noticed, up here is Marshallton, and this is Martin's Tavern, which right now has some ruins, but it's right outside of Marshallton. We have some Continental soldiers just came out of here, and this is Ross's patrol. This is a patrol of about 70 guys, and they're not really there to guard the fort or do anything. They're just kind of roaming the countryside, seeing what's up. And at this point, they see what's up, and it's Cornwallis coming up the road. And there's really not much they can do about this, but you see what they do. They're going to fire a couple shots, and they're going to run down on their horses, and they're going to tell Washington what's going on. And meanwhile, you know, that doesn't slow Cornwallis down. He continues his march, and now he's coming up to Osborne Hill down Birmingham Road, and by about 2:30 or so, you see the British pause. Okay, and this is where they stop for tea. Okay, but but when you it sounds funny, but that's that's when they stop to eat. And it's manly stuff. I mean, they're having bread and cheese and probably a shot of rum. So it's not a teddy bear picnic. It's but it is tea. And again, they just marched 12 miles in 9 hours through the fog and across the waters. They needed to stop. They needed to stop for a second. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the narration piece here, and we're going to talk about what was going on in Washington's head at this point, because all this stuff's going on. And remember, he doesn't know the full story because he's got one point of view. So back at Chad's Ford, for about the 2 hours after Maxwell was driven across the Brandywine, there really wasn't much action down at Chad's Ford. In this period, between about 10 and noon, was known as the mid-morning lull. Okay, and at this point, this is where Major Ferguson, remember him? He's the guy with the rifle, and his riflemen. They took a position on the west side of the creek, and in Ferguson's diary, he writes, "We had not lain long when a rebel officer, remarkable by hussar dress, passed towards our army within 100 yards of my right flank." Now, hussars, these are cavalry units in Europe, and this was probably Count Casimir Pulaski, and you might know that name, Pulaski. He was a Polish cavalry hero who'd helped drive the Russians out of Poland in 1771, and now he's coming to North America by the invitation of Ben Franklin to drive the British out of America. So Ferguson continues in his diary, and he was followed by another dressed in dark green or blue and mounted on a very good horse. And this was likely George Washington himself. Okay, so he's checking out the line, seeing what's up. But the thing is, here's George Washington sitting about 100 yards away from British sharpshooters. Remember, with his accurate rifles. So within that distance, Ferguson continues, "I seldom missed a sheet of paper, and could have lodged a half-dozen balls in or about him before he was out of my reach. But it's not pleasant to fire at the back of an unoffending individual, so I let him alone." Okay, so he could have shot Washington right off, but back then there's a certain code of honor. You don't shoot people in the back, you don't shoot officers on the horses, and even if you might win the battle and win the war, it's just not done. Of course, but had he pulled the trigger that day, the history of North America could have been very different. So that's one of those, I guess.
British subjects.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of those pivotal moments.
Wow.
So now at this point, Washington was relying for intelligence primarily on Colonel Theodoric Bland of the Continental Light Dragoons, and he was up at the northern fords. Seeing what was happening, but Washington heard nothing from him all morning. Okay, so back then, intelligence, we have so much like intelligence apparatus these days. But back then it was pretty much guys on horses, and Washington hadn't heard from his guy on the horse yet. But just before noon, he received a report from Squire Cheney on his horse, and Squire Cheney was from the Chester County Militia, and he reported that Howe had been spotted marching towards Jeffrey's Ford. So Squire Cheney's kind of like our Paul Revere. He's coming down saying the British are coming, and we got to do something. And this report from Squire Cheney was quickly backed up by a report from Colonel Ross. Remember the guy who took a couple shots at the rear of the British line? And Colonel Ross said, yeah, his patrol saw the British, and they'd actually been engaged with the advancing army. So now at this point, this is good. Reports of the British army being split was good news. Because what it meant was that the bulk of Washington's army, if you just look at the numbers there, the bulk of Washington's army was facing only a portion of Howe's army. There's Knyphausen's division. And this would give Washington an opportunity to crush Knyphausen before Cornwallis arrived from the north, because he's still 3 or 4 miles away. But there's really just a small window of opportunity to act here. So Washington, one thing about Washington, he could act quickly. And he immediately ordered his troops, Maxwell's light infantry, to cross back over the creek. Remember, he was the guy by the Kennett Meeting House, to cross back over the creek, and for Sullivan and his division and his Maryland division to cross at Brinton's Ford, while General Greene prepared his entire division to deal a final blow. So things were looking good here. It looks like they might have gotten a break. So let's go back, and we can see what this looks like in the animation. And So we'll bring it back to the point where that guy comes down on his horse, where Ross comes down and tells him what's going on. So let's wait. There he is, and you're going to see. So right now you're going to see. Here's the light infantry. They're going to cross. You're going to see the 3rd Maryland Regiment. They're going to cross, and they're going to start engaging the British and kind of folding in on them. And you know, this could have been really good, but then what you see after that is they pull back. Washington pulls his guys back. Okay, so the question is, what just happened there? We had them where we wanted them, but we pulled back. Well, the thing is, in mid-battle, Washington had received some disturbing intelligence which stated that the British had not split their forces. And in fact, Washington was being led into a trap and was facing the entire British army across the creek. Now, of course, we look at this map here and we say, well, how could he be so dumb? You know, we can look here and we can see that wasn't true. He was facing just a small amount of the British. But Washington needed to listen to his latest intelligence, and he needed to be very conservative. I mean, he wasn't ready to take any chances with his army. If there's any chance that he was going to get beaten at that point, he wasn't going to take that chance. So that's why he pulled back. So unfortunately for us, for the American cause, that was another one of those lost opportunities, another pivotal moment, a lost opportunity for us to engage against a vastly inferior force, and quite possibly, you know, force the surrender down there. Okay, so let's go back to here. So soon after Washington withdrew, he finally heard from Colonel Bland of the Light Dragoons, and he reports, yes, the British Army is split, but now it's really too late to do anything because they're coming right down Birmingham Road and they're right on your right flank. So at this point, Washington again acts quickly, and he sends General Sullivan, General Sterling, and General Stephen up to take a defensive position on Birmingham Hill near the Birmingham Meeting House. Okay, so at this point, this is what we're really getting in. This is where the battle occurs. Okay, and right now this painting here is of the wall by the Birmingham Meeting House, and you can see kind of off in the distance, you see some redcoats coming up the road and coming up the hill. So these are some brave Virginians right here. So around 2 p.m., as the Continentals were scrambling to line up at the Birmingham Meeting House, the British were finishing their tea and preparing for battle, and they're up here on Osborne Hill. Now, the first to see action that afternoon was Captain Johann Ewald and his advanced guards. And we're going to talk about Johann Ewald even in our up here in northern Chester County in a few minutes. He was in charge of advanced guards who were Hessian Jaegers, who marched down Birmingham Road and met with Marshall's 3rd Virginia Regiment right at about where Birmingham Road and Street Road meet. And after this brief encounter, Ewald did a little scouting, and he went up and he saw some of Sterling's men up on the hill. But at this point, there's another one of these odd stories where they didn't shoot at each other; they just waved their hats and said hi. It's another, I guess, another 18th century kind of etiquette. You know, it wasn't time for battle yet. And so Ewald continued on, and now he saw something interesting. He saw Sullivan and his division coming up from Jones's Ford, and you see how they're kind of separated from the rest of the armies. That's kind of important there. So meanwhile, while Ewald is doing his his scouting, the rest of Cornwallis's division was lining up for their assault on Birmingham Hill. So we had on the British right over here, we have His Majesty's Foot Guards, and this is an elite force consisting mainly of British aristocrats. And this is like one of those places where it's good to be in the British Guards if you're seeking promotion and glory, and you know, maybe an estate back in England. And to their left was another elite force. These guys were more elite in their fighting abilities, and this was the Grenadiers, who are known for their intimidating height, and their height was exaggerated by these tall bearskin caps. So these guys are kind of scary when they're coming at you. And it was at this point, while all this was going on, that Sullivan realized that he'd become detached from the rest of the Continental line. Okay, you can see how Stephen and Sterling were lined up, you know, kind of in a straight line with their artillery ready to go, but Sullivan is kind of detached. So he was ordered to get in line. And here's where the problem occurred. Instead of going straight back to get in line, what Sullivan did is he kind of did this little counterclockwise thing, which, you know, not only took time to do, but also put him at risk to get caught out of position, which is exactly what happened. So he's out of position. The guards come down, and the grenadiers head for the middle of the line. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show that in the animation. This is kind of interesting. So what we're going to do, we'll go back. Let's see. They're finishing their tea. Okay, here comes Sullivan. Okay, you see Stephen and Sterling are lining up. Okay, and at this point there's Ewald right there, and this is where he has a little engagement with the 3rd Virginia Regiment. Let's just focus on Ewald for a second. He goes over. This is where he waves his hats. He sees Sullivan coming up. Okay, so let's take that back again. I just wanted to look at Ewald there. We're going to look at Sullivan. He's going to be coming up here from Jones's Ford, and so everyone else is lined up. He finds himself out of position. Okay, so but he's out of position, and the British are coming down. So what he's doing this counterclockwise thing, and he just gets hit on the side. There's nothing we can do, and then the Grenadiers just head right for the middle, and there's not really much Sterling can do at this point because the whole left of the line just collapsed. Okay, so I'm gonna show that one more time. This is kind of like in football, we're gonna replay. Let's show that again. Okay, so here comes the guards and the Grenadiers. They're doing their counterclockwise, and there's really no chance. So and at this point, so the middle, Sterling's middle starts to collapse, and then it just moves to the right. And at this point, we have the brave 3rd Virginia and the brave 3rd Pennsylvania Brigade fighting up here on Sandy Hollow. If I put it's maybe kind of hard to see, but if I put the modern features map on, you can see they're right on top of Sandy Hollow Park. And that's where, so this is kind of where they're making their last stand on Birmingham Hill, and this is also the point where the Marquis de Lafayette famously tries to rally the troops, and that was up here at Sandy Hollow during these last moments of this battle. So let's go back to this. So we're talking about. Okay, yes. So let's look at the east of the line. So that was kind of what's going on the west side. Now Stephen, at this point, he was facing the light infantry, the British light infantry, and the Hessian Jaegers. And both these units were highly mobile and skilled in adapting for difficult terrain. So these are the guys that probably did well at the French and Indian War and learned how to do some of those tactics. So both of these units moved quickly across the valley between Osborne Hill and Birmingham Hill. But soon found themselves pinned down on the north slope of Birmingham Hill with artillery just kind of firing right in their faces. And this is when the 3rd Virginia Regiment still kind of standing behind the line there. So this, I was showing before what happened with the guards and the Grenadiers, but here we're going to see the Hessian Jaegers, and what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to kind of make their way around the flank. First of all, they're getting pinned down on the hill, and they're going to try to make their way around the flank in the artillery. So these are some brave guys coming here right in the face of cannons. And of course, like I said, it ends at Sandy Hollow, where Lafayette's trying to rally the troops. So Lafayette, he was a 19-year-old Frenchman who sympathized with the American cause and was brought over again by Benjamin Franklin in the hopes that bringing this French guy over might help win the French king's sympathy for America. And at Sandy Hollow, actually it was like Lafayette's first real attempt at a real battle, and a ball passed through his leg, forcing him to leave the field with the rest of the retreating army back to Dilworthtown. Okay, so while all that's going on up on Birmingham Hill, remember we still have Knyphausen down here in Chad's Ford, and Wayne and Proctor's artillery. So while all that's going on, the Continental line along the creek is wearing thin. So General Wayne and the artillery are bracing for an assault from Knyphausen, who's preparing his troops, and his orders were to wait for firing to start up on Birmingham Hill, and as soon as the firing, he hears that, it's time to cross the creek, which is what he did. So also what's going on here, we recognize that Washington recognizes that things aren't going good up there, up on Birmingham Hill. So he moves with his officers from Chad's Ford up to Birmingham, and at this point, and this is another one of these very important parts of the battle, he orders General Greene to pull his entire division back to reinforce what will be Sullivan's retreating men. And Greene is going to position himself near Dilworth Town and the William Britton House. Okay, so Greene is marching up the road. He's got to get up there quick. He's marching double time with the battle raging on all fronts. So these guys, these are the Virginians really did a good thing during this battle. So if you're Virginia, you should be proud. And now as the sun was setting, Greene was able to set up his defensive line, and it had his desired effect of blunting the British assault. And Colonel Pulaski comes back in and charges into a field of British bayonets with about 30 horsemen. And all this is going on as it's getting dark. You see, it's about 7 o'clock at this point, and Greene's men were holding the line into the darkness. So let's see what all that looked like. Now the important thing, so like I said, lots of things going on at once here. All this stuff with lines collapsing and people fighting goes on. It's about 4:45, but you're going to see Greene is called, and this is where they're marching double time, and they're heading up here to the William Britton House. They're kind of do this kind of semicircle thing you see here. And remember, at this point, the British, it's getting late, but the British have the Continental Army on the run. So they're going to chase them, and they're kind of like, here, come and get me, and they smash them, and at that point, the British kind of stop in their tracks. So I guess that's kind of an interesting thing to play back. So here. So this is General Greene and his rear guard defense. So the important thing here is, he prevents a potential rout, and now the Continental Army can retreat in peace.
In order.
In order, and no one's chasing them from behind. So that was another kind of an important part of the battle right there. So now the question becomes, well, now the Battle of Brandywine's over. What happens next? Well, we know we're coming up into our area now, and the thing is, for the few days after the Battle of Brandywine, Howe remained on the field. Remember, like I said, down at Couch's Bridge, he fights a battle, then he camps out for like 3 or 4 days. So Howe remained on the field of Brandywine, while some brigades under Cornwallis camped closer to Chester, actually in Aston, at the Seven Stars Tavern in Aston. At this point, the wounded from Brandywine were sent down to Wilmington, which was now under British control. And Washington, where's Washington? Well, he got up to Philadelphia, and he's now camped at East Falls, near Germantown and Manioc, like right near, I guess it's Levering's Ford, which is where Green Road crosses from Manioc. But the thing is that this situation right here kind of leaves Philadelphia exposed, okay, and it prompted the removal of the State House Bell, which is later known as the Liberty Bell, from Philadelphia up to Allentown. And my wife is from Quakertown, and she reminds me that they went through Quakertown and stayed there for a night and hid the Liberty Bell in Quakertown.
Still has a little house.
Yeah, right. There's a little house, right? Exactly. Of course. So you didn't want the Liberty Bell to get melted down and used for ammunition against you. That would have been really bad. So, but at this point, Washington is torn between protecting the colonial capital and guarding the critical ironworks up along French Creek near Reading that are used for manufacturing cannons and ammunition. So so what do? Do you protect the capital, or do you protect your ironworks? And the funny thing is, like in European wars, if you take the capital, you win. It's kind of like a game, and then the one king just gives up to the other king, and they probably have some brandy or something. but here Washington, he wants to survive. Okay, so what he'd really like to do is protect both the capital and the ironworks. So what he did is he unmoored the only bridge leading directly into Philadelphia, which was at Market Street. So now there's no bridge to cross, and down there you're so far. You're talking about the fords. You're down there so far in the Schuylkill River, you really can't ford down there because it's very deep. So he got rid of the bridge, which means the British aren't going to cross that way into Philadelphia. So what Washington does is he decides to head into northern Chester County, and now he's going to guard the upper fords, which is like Sweets Ford and Fatland Ford, up between Phoenixville and Norristown. So Washington's up here in northern Chester County, and as expected, Howe he knows where Washington is. He's got good intelligence. He heads up to meet Washington in northern Chester County. And it looks something like this, if you know this area at all. So you can see down here at the bottom is Chad's Ford, where the British are camped. Down there you got Aston, I got the 7 Stars Tavern marked, and Concord, and because I should probably put Ridley Creek State Park on here, because that's a landmark. And you got Westchester and Malvern, and up the top you got Phoenixville to get you oriented on this map. And what happened on the morning of the 16th, actually at Cornwallis and Howe march up towards the Great Valley near Malvern, where they're going to meet up with Washington. So now Washington, now we're in our territory here. You can see Malvern on there, and the Exton County Library. Washington made his headquarters up at Malin Hall, which is in the Fraser part of East Whiteland. And that's down the hill from Immaculata University. You can see that dome on top of the hill. And this was also near the White Horse Tavern, which is actually back in those days. The White Horse Tavern was really a very popular tavern, a very important tavern, and because it was at a very strategic location, located at the most critical intersections in northern Chester County. And today it's a private residence. It's over on Swedesford Road, actually near the Battle of the Clouds Park, where Plainbrook comes in, and there's a Philadelphia Memorial Park there. It's hard to explain because there's not really any landmarks around there. But in those days it was very important, very strategic. It was strategic because to the east you'd go to Swedesford, which is the way to get to Philadelphia. The roads leading to the north would take you to the Iron region, and the road leading to the west would take you to Downingstown, where there was a important food and supply depot. So he wants to guard this food and supply depots too. And of course the 2 roads leading south head right to Chad's Ford and Aston, which is where Howe and his guys are coming from. So here's how it went. Cornwallis started marching actually at midnight from Aston. I don't know what made him do that, because he didn't get very far. He started marching at midnight and got up to Lima and camped briefly there. And you know where that is? That's over by the Granite Run Mall. So they've made it from the Christiana Mall up to the Granite Run Mall. Then in the morning he continued on his way up 352, past the Penn State campus, while Howe headed from his camp down in Chad's Ford up towards the Turk's Head, which is where Westchester is today. And Howe, he turned east while he ordered Knyphausen and his guys to go north. So now they're coming from like all sorts of directions, all heading towards Washington. Now Washington, he's down. Remember, he's down in the valley, right? So he's thinking, well, maybe down in the valley isn't the greatest place to be. Maybe I should be on top of the hill. So Washington, around noon, moved his guys up onto King Road in front of the Immaculata College to be on high ground as the British approached. So here we are again. It's kind of the same similar situation as in Delaware, where all sorts of troops are lined up and ready to battle in what could have been a big battle, but really didn't end up being much. And I'll tell you how it went here. So they're in front, like I said, they're in front of Immaculata College on King Road. So all the Continental line is lined up. They're between the Boot Tavern, which is at Ship Road and Phoenixville Pike, and today there's a 7-Eleven there. Like we don't always respect our history, so we put up a 7-Eleven there, and then on the other side of the line is the 3 Tons Tavern, which is at King Road and 352 near Hershey's Mill. Okay, so by mid-afternoon, Howe's light infantry over by 3 Tons was engaged with Continental troops over there by Hershey's Mill, while Knyphausen was skirmishing over near the Boot Tavern. Now at this point Washington realized, okay, I'm on high ground, so this is good because I'm on high ground, but coming up those roads I realized that it's going to be very difficult to retreat if we need to retreat. So Washington determined it's probably best not to fight a battle up here. We should head back down into the valley. So that's what they did. And at this point, if you know the story, I mean the skies are darkening and it's really starting to look like a bad storm is coming as they're heading down the hill. At this point, it's already raining, but it's just a regular rain. So they regroup And they're over here along, you see, that dotted line is the Chester Valley Trail. So if you ever wonder if there's any interpretive possibilities along the Chester Valley Trail, the White Horse Tavern, lots of stuff. I mean, you'll see they were there before the Battle of the Clouds at the White Horse Tavern, after the Battle of the Clouds, before Paoli and after Paoli. So it was a real spot. So they were grouped down there at the White Horse Tavern, and like I said, that's over by the Battle of Clouds Park. But there really wasn't much action that day, and what we know today is the Battle of the Clouds never really amounted to much because it was preempted by a September hurricane. So it's September. You know the rain. You know about the rains we get in September around here. It was one of those, and that stopped the British in their tracks. Okay, so which was pretty fortunate for Washington. But before long, Washington realized again that he's in a dangerous position because all his ammunition is wet, and the last thing he needs is the British to come charging down the hill in the rain with their bayonets and him being unable to shoot back at them. So as the storm raged, whether his troops liked it or not, they got to go up the North Hill, up like the Batkin Hill Road, and they headed up towards Yellow Springs, which was a good place for rest and relaxation back then. So they headed up the whole army. Washington's whole army heads up to Yellow Springs, and they stayed there for a night to wait out the storm, while Howe and his guys remained where when the hurricane hit, they just stopped and found places to sleep. But immediately, now see, so the whole thing, you'll notice how Howe kind of moves. He moves, he battles, then he stops for a little while, then he moves, he battles, and Washington is just constantly moving. So immediately the next morning, the rain stops, the roads are ridiculous, but Washington says, okay, now it's time to head, since we're out of supplies, we got to head up to Reading Furnace, and they pass right by a Continental gunpowder mill along Route 113 at this point in East Pikeland. You can barely see it right there. And what they're doing is they're heading towards Reading Furnace. And as they head towards Reading Furnace, he leaves General Wayne behind to keep an eye on Howe. So now it's almost like now we're starting the Paoli massacre story, because now we're leaving Wayne behind to keep an eye out. Also at this point he sent Maxwell, remember Maxwell and his light infantry, sent them over to Valley Forge. Okay, because there's actually a whole bunch of supplies stored at Valley Forge, and we don't want the British getting to our supplies. So the next day, Washington continued his trudge over to the furnaces, and that's over near French Creek State Park, Hopewell Furnace, and they got the national park up there. And while he's camped over there at Reading Furnace, Howe heads into the valley. The rain stopped. Howe heads into the valley, and he goes through East Whiteland. Some of his guys take the Swedesford Road into the valley, and some of them head on the Lancaster Road up onto the ridge by the Paoli Tavern, and there they camp in Tredyffrin. And they camped in Tredyffrin for 3 nights. Okay, so all the local Tredyffrin people, which is where we are right now, we're going to go a little bit into detail as to where these guys were. You can see them there on the big map, but I'll zoom in. Okay, so here we have, once again, we got the same 15,000 British troops occupying Tredyffrin. Some of them were up on the ridge along Conestoga Road. You got Jenkins Arboretum, Route 30. You got Bear, Keller, and all those guys. The troops are right there. Most of the troops are actually down in the valley along what today is the power lines. And we're familiar with a lot of these brigades. Remember, they've got the Hessians and Kneipphaus and his guys. Remember them? Well, they're camped over by the Barnes and Noble and the Gateway Shopping Center. So now you can think a little differently when you're at Barnes and Noble and Gateway. That's where the Hessians were. And I think there is a monument over there somewhere. We also have the guards. These are the guys that caught Sullivan while he was doing his counterclockwise thing. Well, the guards were over near Tea Garden Park, which is where Howe's headquarters was. And the Grenadiers, the guys with the bearskin caps, they were up on top of the ridge by Jenkins Arboretum. We had a brigade of light infantry down in Howeville, where Howe's Tavern was. It doesn't exist anymore. Also, now we're also along the Chester Valley Trail again. You'll notice that dotted line. So we had light infantry down there along, I guess it's Dalesford Lakes. Well, another light infantry was on top of the ridge near Devon and near St. Luke. So now the thing was, this camp, they stayed here for 3 days for a couple reasons. First of all, the Schuylkill River was raging still because they just had the hurricane, right? So for a couple days after that, there's really not much you can do to cross, at these fords, because it's, now it's, water over your head. So they needed a good place to stay while the water was raging. Plus, there was some really good farmland around here, and lots of people you can take their pigs and their cows and their crops and really have some good meals. And also, according to Frederick von Munchenhausen, who was a Hessian member of Howe's staff, the Valley Creek, he said, which flows through our camp, has the best water I've tasted here in America. So here's something else we got to be proud of, is that we got some really good water. I wouldn't recommend drinking it today, but back then this area was known for really good water. I think it has to do with the limestone. Meanwhile, okay, well the British were camped down there. Now we're going to go a little bit up to the north here. Remember, Maxwell was sent over to Valley Forge to get stuff out of the supply depot. He was at this point Maxwell was joined by Light Horse Harry Lee and Alexander Hamilton. Okay, and we've probably heard both those names before. Harry Lee was the future father of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, and we know Alexander Hamilton was soon to become the first Secretary of the Treasury under Washington, and we know Hamilton from the $10 bill, and of course the Phillies fans recognize Hamilton from the Citizens Bank commercials. He's the guy in the passenger seat. So Lee and Hamilton, I mean, they're working hard. There's a ton of supplies here, and there's not many guys, so they're working really hard, really fast to get rid of this stuff before the British get to them. But the British are onto them, and they send up Colonel Harcourt and the Light Dragoons and some light infantry to seize the supplies that these guys are trying to move out. And actually, as they head up there, there were some shots fired up there at Valley Forge, and the Continentals were quickly driven off. And I guess what you could call the Battle of Valley Forge. There was maybe just a few shots fired. Nobody was killed. I think maybe a horse was killed. Hamilton managed to escape across the river, across the Schuylkill River, while Lee. There was a ferry there. He took a little raft across, while Lee rode back to the main camp at Reading Furnace. Okay, so now we're going to zoom back out to the big picture, and there's Lee heading back to Reading Furnace. Okay, so now the next morning, after all that's going on, here's Anthony Wayne. He's going to take a new position. Remember, he was at Yellow Springs. Now he's going to head over to the Paoli Tavern, and this was really a bold move. And there's a reason why they call him Mad Anthony Wayne. I mean, this is there's 15,000 British troops, and he's just kind of sitting there like waving at them. Now, and at this point, Washington, there was a plan to this. Washington had a plan to get in front of Howe by covering the fords of the Schuylkill River. Okay, just like he'd done down in Delaware along the Red Clay Creek, and just like he'd done at Brandywine. He's going to cover the fords. And we talked about the fords earlier, so you know why that's important. And the plan was, while he's covering the fords, then Wayne could maybe harass his rear baggage supplies and cause some trouble. So that evening, Washington started his march. He crossed the Schuylkill River at Parker's Ford, which is where there's the Parker's Ford Tavern, which has just recently been preserved, and that's up by the Limerick power plant. So you get an idea of kind of where these things are located. You see those clouds in the distance. That's where. So when you see those clouds in the distance, now you can think about that's where Washington crossed. Now Wayne at this point he realized he was being maybe a little bit too bold up there at Paoli Tavern, so he moved his camp back to Malvern, in the place we're familiar with, the Malvern, the Paoli battlefield area. And he stayed. His plan was to stay in Malvern and waiting for General Smallwood, who was arriving from Maryland with some militia that he raised in Maryland. And they were now camped in Downingtown. Remember, there's a supply depot in Downingtown, and Smallwood maybe stayed there a little longer than he should, but who could blame him? There's plenty of supplies, lots of stuff to eat. So that's over by Downingtown near Bishop Shanahan. So that night, Washington, he made it very, very late that night to Collegeville. Again, he's always on the move. Sleeping where they march. And on the morning of the 20th, Washington had the fords along the Schuylkill covered. So his army stretched at this point You know, this is one of these things, and this is the Paoli Massacre we're talking about right here. This is the part of the Paoli Massacre story that you don't really talk about too much, because nothing really happened, but it's still kind of interesting. See, Washington's army, it stretched from the upper fords of along the Schuylkill River from about Norristown to Phoenixville, and I'm gonna zoom in on that, and you can see here at Norristown, it's at Swedes Ford. It was well guarded. So Swedes Ford was really probably the best ford, like the most likely place to cross. But it was guarded not only by the raging waters, but also by a couple of brigades and some artillery. But the main camp of Washington was up at Camp Providence, which is in lower, I guess what is today Lower Providence Township. But back then, the two Providences were one township. And this is on the north side of Valley Forge, between Valley Forge Park and Route 29, basically. Now, Fatland Ford was a very important ford back then, because it crossed from Montgomery County to the Baptist Road, and the reason that's a Baptist Road because it went down to the Great Valley Baptist Church in Tredyffrin. And it was here at Fatland Ford that Washington set up his temporary headquarters. So, I mean, you could say this was the first Valley Forge encampment and the first Washington headquarters in Valley Forge, but I don't know if Valley Forge is ready to reinterpret at this point. Now, this was directly across the river from General Cornwallis and a whole bunch of light infantry. And you'll also notice on this map on the very left is the Continental Powder Works, the Gunpowder Works and Gunlock Factory, and this is along French Creek. Along the French Creek, and you can see that it's left undefended. And I guess Washington realized that, and sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. So back to the main story with Wayne. Wayne at this point thought his division was undetected by the British. He thought he was kind of being stealth here. But the problem is he's sending notes back and forth to Washington, and you can see where Wayne is and where Washington is. And any note you send back and forth has a very good likelihood to be picked up by the enemy. So turns out he wasn't as hidden as he thought. But anyway, he didn't realize that they knew about him. And his idea at this point was he was going to wait for Smallwood to arrive. You know, maybe that day, maybe that night, and then maybe tomorrow he and Smallwood could really, you know, hit Howe from behind. You know, and you know, if Washington cooperated, maybe Washington could send some guys across, and they could drive Howe against the Schuylkill River and get him to surrender up here in Chester County. You know, could have been the Battle of the Schuylkill River, the Battle of Tredyffrin. Could have been something. But the problem was, like I said, because of the British intelligence, you know, Howe knew the plan. He didn't like the plan, so he ordered General Gray, who was headquartered at the Howe's Tavern, to make a nighttime raid and put a stop to this. Okay. So, you know, a lot of times the Paoli Massacre kind of gets spun like poor Wayne, he was just sleeping in his bed and these guys attacked him. Well, Wayne had some pretty devious plans for the next morning. So this is what the British are trying to stop. So let's see what that looks like on this other animated map. So this is it should look kind of familiar here, kind of similar. This is kind of like the Brandywine one, except now we've got Tredyffrin over here. We got you know, we got the British encampment, like I said. We got, you know, these different brigades. We got Wayne and Smallwood over here in Downingtown. And let's see if there's anything. Let's see. Over here is Howe's headquarters, and I got to apologize. I don't have permission for some of these pictures yet, so you'll just have to forgive me for that. And then we have Howe's Tavern where Gray is camped. So I'm going to start this up, and what happens here is Smallwood. This is 6 o'clock at night, right? So Smallwood, it's just starting to get dark, and Smallwood's heading over to meet Wayne and give him reinforcements, so maybe they can do their thing tomorrow morning. And what you're going to see over here, you're going to see some activity over here in the British camp. Here comes some dragoons and some other guys, and they're all lining up. And here it is around 10 o'clock. Smallwood has made it. And you see Smallwood moves a lot slower than the British. The British are trained professionals. They just fly down these roads. Smallwood and his militia guys, they move kind of slow. So they've now made it to the White Horse Tavern. Here we have Gray and his guys lined up along Swedesford Road. And I'm sure I'll point out for you guys where this is. This is where Swedesford Road crosses under the Swedesford Road and 202 cross, right near what's that bed and breakfast?
Great Valley House.
No, right, that one, yeah. Right over by the Great Valley House. And they're lined up. They're lined up and ready to go. And what you're going to see is I'm going to start this off, and they're just going to. You're going to see the British come tearing down the road, and here they are. They're going past the Great Valley Presbyterian Church down Sweetsford Road, and heading right for these guys. I'm going to rewind that again. These are some vedettes, which are pickets. They're kind of scouting things out. They're pickets on horseback, and they get hit there around 11 o'clock. So let's just going to go back to the story a little bit. This is kind of almost like a little side note here, because of local interest. As Gray was marching down the road, down Sweetsford Road, he took a number of civilian prisoners. Okay, because you don't want these guys getting out and alerting Wayne as to what's going on. So they're dragging people out of their beds, taking the prisoners. And one of the prisoners was Benjamin Bartholomew, whose family owned a lot of land along the Tredyffrin East Whiteland border, mostly on the East Whiteland side. And his nephews were Captain Benjamin Bartholomew and Colonel John Bartholomew, both of in the Continental Army, and they all kind of lived on the homestead in that general area. But the colonel and the captain were not home that night. Captain Bartholomew, he's actually with Wayne's 5th Regiment, so he's kind of this is of local interest to them. The other Colonel Bartholomew was guiding pickets up to Paoli, so they knew where to keep their eye on the British, and that's over near the Paoli Tavern. And the view from that position today, the view is like this. Now we're over by the Burger King and Good Sam, looking down towards the Ford dealership. And if you know the area, you're kind of up on a little bit of a rise here, and he goes down towards Valley Road, and then he goes up again to the Paoli Library. So we're looking down that little bowl right there, and that's where the Continental pickets were led by this Colonel Bartholomew. So now the Bartholomew brothers' involvement in the Continental Army, probably explains the rough treatment that their Uncle Ben received that night, clad only in his nightshirt. But these two local heroes, they're actually still near us today because they're both buried over there at the Great Valley Baptist Church. So just wanted to give you an idea, that all this stuff's going on, and sometimes we get detached and we just at least I do. I just start looking at boxes, and you got to remember these are people who, are defending their country and defending their own homestead even. So here we are at the Paoli Massacre. So I'll kind of review just a little bit here. Remember, we got Howe over there on the edge. We got Gray coming up the road, and we got Wayne on top of the hill. Now they got to the Warren Tavern at about 11 o'clock, and they paused there for a little while to get some intelligence of what's the best way. Because remember, this is the middle of the night. This is 11:30 at night, and this is a place they haven't been before, and the roads are bad. So they want to make sure that they're going to the right place. And their plan, what they wanted to do, was approach Wayne from the west, okay? And then what that would do is that would drive Wayne towards the waiting Musgrave, General Musgrave, who's over there by the Paoli Tavern. And at that point, you've got Wayne surrounded and captured in this pincer move, and you probably would have forced the surrender of Wayne at that point. So that would have been bad. So luckily for us, the guy who led them up the hill, whether he did it on purpose or not, I guess we don't really know. Well, let me just do this. From Musgrave's view from where he was now here at the Paoli Library, so you can see off in the distance, you can see where the Burger King would have been, and you can see how this little bowl right there is kind of like a no man's land, right? So the British run hit this side, the Continental pickets on the other side, but the pickets didn't really hang around too long once they saw the British, but you kind of get an idea of where all this stuff was going next time you're driving down the road. But like I said, they got the intelligence they got for getting up the hill took them up this side on the east side of Wayne, which was very fortunate for us. Another one of those pivotal moments, really, because this way, when Wayne does get attacked, as we know he's going to, he's able to escape in relative peace. Okay, so let's take a look at that and see what that looks like. Okay, so remember we got Smallwood coming up here, we got Gray, and what you're going to see. And why don't I zoom in a little bit for this? What you're going to see is here is Wayne, and they're camped up here. These guys are going to come up. They're going to hit. There's picket number 4. He's going to get bayoneted. Picket number 3, he's going to get bayoneted, and then this whole camp's going to move to the west. So let's see how that looks. It kind of happens fast. So there's this pausing at the Warren Tavern, coming up, hitting that picket, getting those pickets, and here they just drive Wayne and his guys, you know, across the field and out. And I'll play that again because it kind of see what's going on. And you see the guys, you know, we got guys, stragglers. They're scattering, and you know, they really don't know what to do, and they, you know, Wayne is trying to get out, but he's got these fences, and these fences are really slowing him down. So that's part of the problem. Another thing you're going to notice here is, remember, Smallwood's coming to help. You know, here we are at midnight. Smallwood finally gets there to help, and by the time he gets there, it's a little bit too late. And in fact, we even have a little bit of friendly fire, because remember, it's the middle of the night, and you know, who knows what's going on. There's guys coming out of the woods. You just shoot at them. So that was kind of unfortunate, but it didn't last too long. And Wayne and his guys head back down to where else but the White Horse Tavern. Now, there's one other thing to show during this. While all that nasty stuff's going on, remember, we got Musgrave setting up here by the Paoli Library. He sends a little patrol, a little squad down to Waynesboro, because they're looking for Wayne. I don't know what makes them think Wayne would have been at home that night, but they were, I guess they were in the neighborhood, so they thought they'd check out to see if he was there. But of course he wasn't. He was over here retreating with his men down to the.
What's the road that Gray's people are moving down? Then attack.
Oh, this that would be
no, left to the left.
Gray.
Gray's men. What on?
Yeah, there we are. They're on
this.
There.
Yeah, this
gray line. Yeah.
Right. That's about where I guess it's Warren Avenue, the main road in Malvern. I guess let's put the main features on there. I mean,
General Warren's in.
yes. So they're coming up. Yeah, right by the Malvern Library. They're coming up Warren. You know, I guess by the train station. Actually, a little bit to the east. It's actually Longford Avenue, I think it's called now. Is where they would have come in. So they are. You can kind of get the modern day view of what's going on. And and I just for the planners out there, you know, we got them going over tax parcels.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
But we don't want to get too much into that. Okay, so at this point in right by the Flying Pig, right? So in the middle of the night, you know, Howe and his guys they head back to camp to report on what went on. Wayne and his guys, they head over to Lionville, over to a meeting house there, and you're going to see right over here. Here's a burial patrol, and the reason why there's a burial patrol there is because there was a couple British casualties. There was an officer who was killed, and they weren't going to bury him in a Presbyterian church. Do I need to explain why, or you guys are good with that? But they went up. So they went up to the Anglican church, because that's where you bury British officers. And you know, as they return, now it's 8 in the morning, and the British move on. The different encampment is over, and they're heading up north. And at this point, Washington doesn't know what to do. He knows by this point he knows what happened to Wayne, and he knows he just lost 2 divisions back there. And Howe is going to actually set up camp along what's now Route 23 up towards Phoenixville, and in a couple days he's going to cross. And also there's the Hessian Jaegers. These guys, remember Ewald back at the Battle of Brandywine. He goes and finds that Continental powder mill, which I don't have on this map, and I think I want to add it, which is right up here, the Continental powder mill, and he burns it down. And another thing of local interest there, that Continental powder mill was owned by Peter DeHaven. And I didn't realize this, but I got a call from, is Bill here tonight? Because Bill told me, hey, that's my great grandfather.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so Peter DeHaven owned a Continental gunpowder mill right up there on Route 113.
That was at Raps Dam.
Excuse me?
Was that off Raps Dam, or was it?
I don't think it was there. It's actually East Pikeland's gotten a grant to do some archaeological work there at the powder mill. It's right just east of Kimberton. So anyway, so at the end of the day, at 10:30 in the morning, we're at Lionville, and these guys are up here. So that's pretty much the Battle of Paoli in the animation. And so let me just, I know we just got a few minutes here. I just want to wrap up and kind of come to closure here, because I told you a whole bunch of stuff at the beginning, and I know you're all wondering like what happened to Burgoyne and all that. After the Paoli massacre, Washington, headed into Montgomery County. He was driven back, and at this point, the situation was so dire in Philadelphia. The British are on their way. It compelled the Continental Congress to move 100 miles west to York. And by the 26th of September, Howe had taken Philadelphia, or as Benjamin Franklin put it from his diplomatic desk in France, Philadelphia had taken Howe. And I'm gonna discuss what he means by that. So a week later, Washington doesn't give up. He's brave. He's going to make one last attempt to dislodge Howe from Philadelphia, and this was the Battle of Germantown. But of course, at this, Washington is repelled. Another one of those near wins. Washington was repelled, and so he heads back into Montgomery County again. And at this point, what General Howe would really like to do, because it's still October. There's still some good weather, still some fighting weather left. He wants to get resupplied and go and get Washington before winter sets in. But all Howe needs is for his brother, Admiral Howe, remember him, to come up the river and get him his supplies he needs. Because remember, he's just been marching for a month and he's kind of out of stuff. And by the time he gets to Philadelphia, people have hidden all the stuff. So he needs to be resupplied. But fortunately, due to the brave soldiers at Fort Mifflin, they delayed Admiral Howe from coming up the river until mid-November. So Fort Mifflin, that's down there by the airport. So because it took Admiral Howe to get so long to get up the river, by the time he got there, it was really now it was too late to fight, and this gave General Washington some breathing room to set up his winter encampment at Valley Forge. Okay, so now if you look at this, okay, so he didn't come out and get Washington. But Washington's over here in Valley Forge, and things are looking pretty bad. If you're watching this on the news, you wouldn't think things are going very, very well for your country. Because I mean, the Liberty Bell, one of your symbols is up in Allentown, and the government's exiled, out west, and the army is, forced to camp, camp in the fields of Valley Forge. So this really was, to people who were there, this would have been one of the darkest moments in American history. But as Howe was settling down in Philadelphia, there was some good news arriving, and the good news was arriving from up north, from Saratoga, New York, where General Burgoyne, who didn't get much assistance up there, ended up having to surrender to the Northern Continental Army, and this, of course, foiled the plan to split the colonies. And now, remember, General Howe, he was supposed to be up there. He was supposed to be helping out. So he was severely criticized for this. Like Burgoyne's like, it was all Howe's fault. He didn't help me out. So he was criticized for not being a team player. Howe was, and that winter he resigned his command from the army and returned to England and was replaced by Henry Clinton, who by the springtime saw no reason to remain in occupation of Philadelphia because he had to be concerned about the new alliance that the United States had made with France. So like this whole Philadelphia thing, it was fun and all, but it really didn't amount to much. All it really did was distract the British from helping out Burgoyne and screwing up that plan. So I think that might have been what Franklin was getting at. So in the spring, Clinton's army marched across New Jersey back to New York City, where they started, remember, about a year ago. But they did meet with significant resistance at Monmouth Courthouse from Washington's army. Remember, Washington's army, they're now newly trained and rejuvenated after their winter in Valley Forge. And at the Battle of Monmouth, it wasn't a clear-cut victory for either side, but for the first time, Washington's army withstood a direct British assault without retreating, and in fact ended up possessing the field at the end of the day. So they were, kind of happy. Of course, both sides claimed victory in this, and the British continued their march to New York City, which is what they were doing anyway.
Is that the battle before which Washington crosses the Delaware?
Washington crossed the Delaware actually sometime before Brandywine, but after Long Island. Okay. So now with Britain's Philadelphia campaign over, there was no more significant action up here in the Northern Theater. So the war moved south to Yorktown, south to Carolinas, and eventually to Yorktown. And Yorktown, we all know, is the end. That's the end.